Story 1. The overnight shift at Harborview Aquarium. I never thought an aquarium could feel haunted. During the day, Harborview was loud. Children tapping glass, tour guides explaining reef ecosystems, water pumps humming constantly. At night, it was something else entirely. I took the overnight maintenance job because it paid more and because I prefer quiet. I didn't know quiet could feel like pressure. After closing, the lights dimmed automatically. Only emergency strips along the floors remained on. The tanks glowed faintly from within, blue, green, soft, ultraviolet. Fish drifted slowly in artificial currents. Yet the building sounded alive. Water circulating through miles of tubing inside the walls, pumps breathing in steady rhythm. It felt organic. Too organic. My job was simple. Monitor filtration levels, check seals, log water temperature. The first week was normal. Then I noticed something about the largest tank the open ocean exhibit. A 40-foot viewing wall, massive, mesmerizing, and strangely darker than the others. The lighting system inside the tank cycled gradually overnight. But sometimes, around 2:13 a.m., the far left corner dimmed more than the rest. Like a shadow passed over the internal lights, except nothing inside the tank was big enough to block it. No sharks in that section, no structures, just open water. The first time I saw the shadow, I blamed refraction. Light bending through water. Normal. Until I stood directly in front of the glass. The shadow aligned with me, centered, as if mirroring my position. I stepped to the right, the shadow shifted right. It's not fluidly like a fish, but in delayed increments. It's correcting itself. I told myself it was coincidence. Then the glass fogged slightly. From the inside, the aquarium glass doesn't fog from the inside. Water temperature is controlled. There's no condensation, but a faint oval patch formed at eye level, right where someone's face would be if they were pressed against the interior wall. Looking out, I leaned closer. My reflection overlapped the fogged shape. For a moment, it looked like two faces occupying the same space. Then the pump stuttered. Just for a second, the entire tank darkened, and something moved behind the fog. It wasn't swimming. It was standing, vertical, where nothing should be able to stand. Too tall to be a diver, too still to be an animal. When the lights stabilized, it was gone. The fog dissipated instantly. I reviewed the security footage from that hour. The camera showed me standing in front of the tank, alone. But behind me, in the reflection of the glass, a darker silhouette stood slightly offset from my body, not matching my movement, not aligned with the room. The next night, I avoided the ocean tank. I worked in the jellyfish wing instead. Soft pink lights, slow drifting shapes, calming, until every jellyfish in the tank contracted at once, simultaneously, as if reacting to vibration. The water in the jellyfish tank began to swirl. It's not violently, but against its programmed current, moving inward toward the glass, toward me. The same oval fog patch formed again, to face height. This time, I didn't step closer, step back. The fog remained, unchanging, waiting. Then the pumps in the entire wing cut out. Silence fell abruptly. No water movement. No hum. Just stillness. In total silence, I heard something new. It's not mechanical. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. But muffled like it was happening underwater. The fog thickened, and faint lines appeared within it. Finger streaks, pressed from inside. The breathing synchronized with the emergency lights flickering. Inhale, lights dim. Exhale, lights brighten. Inhale, dim. Exhale, brighten. The building felt submerged. Even though I stood in dry air, I whispered, "You're not in the tank." The breathing stopped. The fog pulsed outward once, then cleared. All pumps restarted simultaneously. As if nothing had malfunctioned, I considered quitting. Instead, I brought a handheld EMF reader the following night. Not because I fully believed, but because patterns demand testing. At 2:13 a.m., the ocean tank darkened again. The EMF reader spiked, only in front of the glass. The spike moved, horizontally, tracking the same invisible line as the shadow. I followed it along the viewing wall. The spike stopped directly in front of me and held steady. The glass began to vibrate faintly, not cracking, not shattering, just humming, like something leaned against it. From the other side, water pressure didn't change. No alarms triggered, but the EMF reading maxed out. The fog formed again, larger this time, wide enough for shoulders. A full upper body outline pressed from inside, head tilted slightly, as if studying me. I placed my hand against the glass. Immediately, a cold pressure met mine. Through several inches of reinforced acrylic and thousands of gallons of water, something pressed back, not aggressively, just firmly. Matching shape, it's matching size. The pumps faltered again, but this time, the water inside the tank didn't move. It stilled completely. Fish froze mid-swim, suspended, as if paused. Only the silhouette remained animated, breathing. Then I heard it clearly, not from the tank. From behind me, wet footsteps. I turned slowly. The floor was dry, but faint water prints appeared, leading from the ocean tank across the polished concrete, toward the exit door. When I looked back at the tank, the silhouette was gone. The water resumed motion. Fish scattered normally. The fog faded. The EMF reading dropped to 0, but the wet footprints remained, stopping inches from where I stood, facing me. I quit 2 days later. The official reason: structural maintenance delays. But sometimes I pass Harborview Aquarium during evening hours. The building looks calm, serene, blue lights glowing softly inside. And if I stand still long enough near the viewing wall, the glass fogs slightly. At face height from the outside. Thanks for listening. And if you like scary stories like this, make sure to subscribe. Story 2. The maintenance tunnel beneath Platform 6. I never worked the trains. I worked what was underneath them. Platform 6 at Aldero Central Station looks normal from above commuters. Announcements, the metallic scent of brake dust. But below it, past a locked service door marked Authorized Personnel Only, there's a different world. Concrete corridors, utility piping, drainage channels, electrical conduits humming like nerves under skin. It's where I did night inspections, alone. The maintenance tunnels run parallel to the tracks. Most of the noise from above filters down as distant vibrations. At 1:40 a.m., the last train departs. By 2 a.m., the station should be silent. My job was to log temperature readings from electrical panels, check for leaks, and confirm structural integrity. Routine, mechanical, predictable, until the tools started moving. The first incident was small. I set my flashlight on a metal shelf while tightening a bolt along a conduit bracket. When I reached back for it, it wasn't there. I assumed it had rolled off, but it was upright, placed carefully on the opposite end of the shelf. I hadn't heard it fall, hadn't heard it slide. I told myself I'd absent-mindedly moved it. Night shifts distort memory. 2 nights later, the same thing happened with my wrench. I left it beside a junction box, turned to log data. When I turned back, it was hanging from a pipe behind me, balanced in a way that required deliberate placement. There are no drafts strong enough underground to lift tools, and there's no one else scheduled in that sector after midnight. I reported it casually to my supervisor. He laughed and said, "The tunnels like to keep things. Old infrastructure joke." Lost bolts, missing gloves, dropped screws that vanish into cracks. But tools don't reappear in visible places. That's not losing, that's relocation. The first time I heard knocking, I thought it was thermal expansion. Metal pipes contract overnight. They tick and pop. But this wasn't random. It was patterned. 3 knocks, pause. 2 knocks, pause. 3 knocks again. It echoed from somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Not from the walls, from the air itself. I followed the sound. It moved. Each time I turned a corner, the knocking resumed farther down, like it was guiding me, staying ahead. When I stopped walking, it stopped. When I resumed, it resumed. 3, 2, 3. Consistent, deliberate. At 2:13 a.m., the overhead fluorescent lights flickered. Not a power surge, the electrical panel readings were stable. The lights dimmed in sequence down the corridor, one by one, as if something was moving through the tunnel. triggering each fixture in passing. The knocking stopped. In its place came dragging, metal against concrete. Slow, measured. I stood still and held my breath. The dragging stopped too. Silence filled the tunnel so completely I could hear the blood in my ears. Then my radio crackled. There was no scheduled communication at that hour. I lifted it slowly. "Maintenance to base," I whispered. No response. It's just a faint rhythmic tapping through the speaker. 3, 2, 3. The next night I brought a second flashlight. Redundancy calms anxiety. At exactly 2:13 a.m., both lights shut off. Simultaneously, fresh batteries. No flicker, just immediate darkness. In that darkness, I felt vibration beneath my boots. Not from trains, from beneath the concrete floor. Like something striking upward. 3 times, pause. 2 times, pause. 3. The air temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath. Underground tunnels don't fluctuate that quickly. I aimed my backup flashlight down the corridor. My toolbox left 30 feet away was sliding, not falling, not tipping, sliding smoothly across the concrete floor toward me. It stopped inches from my feet. The lid lifted slightly, then slammed shut. The lights returned. Everything appeared normal. Toolbox stationary. Pipes steady. But the arrangement of equipment along the wall had changed. Wrenches lined up in a perfect row. Screwdrivers arranged by size. My gloves placed neatly on top. Order imposed where there had been none. I decided to test it. I scattered the tools intentionally. Left bolts rolling unevenly across the floor. At 2:13 a.m., the knocking began. 3, 2, 3. The bolts started to vibrate. Subtle at first, and they rolled each one back toward the toolbox. Not chaotically, purposefully. The toolbox lid opened on its own. The bolts dropped inside, one at a time. It wasn't random movement. It was correction, as if something disliked disorder. I whispered, "You want it organized?" The knocking stopped. The fluorescent lights brightened slightly. My radio emitted a single burst of static. I didn't know if that was confirmation, but the air felt less hostile, less charged. For the next week, I kept everything meticulously arranged. No misplaced screws, no scattered parts. The tunnels remained quiet, no knocking, no dragging. Just the steady hum of electricity, till I forgot it was a long shift. I replaced a corroded bracket and left the old one on the floor temporarily. At 2:13 a.m., the lights shut off instantly. The temperature dropped. The dragging sound returned, but closer this time, right behind me. I felt pressure between my shoulder blades, not pushing, just present. The old bracket lifted off the ground. Slowly, it hovered at waist height for 3 seconds. Then it flew down the corridor and struck the wall, hard. The impact echoed violently. 3 times, pause. 2 times, pause. 3, the knocking pattern had changed from distant to immediate. The pipes along the ceiling began rattling. Not randomly, sequentially, like footsteps overhead. But there is no floor above that corridor, only reinforced track foundation. The rattling followed me as I backed away. Every step I took was mirrored by metallic vibration above. Perfect synchronization. I reached the service ladder that leads up to platform 6. The hatch at the top was closed, locked from the inside as required. The knocking traveled up the ladder rails. Clang, clang, clang. It stopped directly beneath my hands. The hatch handle began to shake, violently, metal slamming against metal. No one should have been on the platform at that hour. No train scheduled. No cleaning crew. The handle twisted back and forth, then stopped abruptly. Silence. When I climbed up and unlocked the hatch, platform 6 was empty, but the benches had shifted. All 3 metal benches faced the track directly. Normally, they're angled outward. Every trash can had been moved into a straight line along the wall. Perfect spacing, exact alignment. Order imposed again. The station manager checked security footage the next morning. No one appeared on camera, no movement recorded. The benches were seen shifting between frames. One moment normal, next frame repositioned, as if edited. I returned one last night to confirm. At 2:13 a.m., I deliberately knocked on the wall. 3 times. Pause. 2 times. Pause. 3. The pipes above me answered. Exact rhythm. Metal reverberation from every direction. The toolbox lid lifted. Closed. Lifted again. Closed. The air felt dense. Not malicious, but expectant. I straightened a crooked conduit bracket and said quietly, "That's better." The light stabilized. The temperature normalized. The knocking ceased. For the first time, the tunnel felt calm. I requested reassignment the following week. Not out of fear, out of understanding. Whatever exists beneath Platform 6 doesn't want attention. It wants structure, precision, order. The current maintenance crew reports no disturbances. They're meticulous. Every bolt cataloged, every tool returned to exact position. But sometimes, when the last train leaves and the station empties, Platform 6 benches shift slightly, lining themselves, as if inspected by something unseen. And beneath the concrete floor, 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3. Thanks for listening. And if you like scary stories like this, make sure to subscribe. Story 3. The thing that followed the radio signal. I wasn't supposed to stay overnight. The assignment was simple. Travel to a decommissioned climate research station in the Arctic. Retrieve archived hard drives, confirm the building's structural integrity, and report back. 2 days, in and out. The station sat on the edge of a frozen fjord in the Svalbard archipelago, isolated, wind-cut, and almost permanently white. The nearest settlement was hours away by snowmobile. The research team had abandoned the site 5 years earlier after funding was pulled. No dramatic shutdown, no tragedy, just bureaucracy. At least that's what the file said. The building was modular, metal siding, reinforced windows, antenna arrays bolted to the roof like skeletal fingers. When I arrived, the wind was violent but predictable. Arctic wind doesn't howl randomly, moves in long, steady exhalations. The door was sealed, but not locked. Inside, the air smelled stale, but not decayed. Dust, cold electronics, old coffee. The generator room was still functional. Backup battery systems hummed when I powered them. It should have felt abandoned. It didn't. It felt paused. The station was designed around a central operations room radios, satellite uplinks, monitoring consoles. Most of the screens were dark, except one. A small signal monitor was active, not fully on, just enough to show input. A thin green line pulsed across the display, receiving something. I checked the logbooks. The last recorded transmission entry was dated 3 days before official closure. The note read, "Signal returning stronger at night. Source still unidentified. No coordinates, no elaboration, just that." I assumed it referred to atmospheric interference. Solar storms sometimes create anomalies at these latitudes. Still, the timing bothered me, returning stronger at night. At 1940, the sun dipped fully below the horizon. Arctic night isn't like regular darkness. It's deeper, heavier. The station lights cast harsh artificial pools against endless white outside. At exactly 2013, the signal monitor spiked. The green line jumped violently, then stabilized into a rhythmic pulse. At first, I activated the audio feed. At first, it was static, then something beneath it. A low oscillation, not mechanical, not electrical. It sounded organic, like breath pulled through a long, hollow tunnel. Slow, measured, repetitive. I scanned known frequencies. It didn't match emergency bands. Didn't match maritime channels. Didn't match aviation. The signal had no identifiable modulation pattern. But it had cadence. For long pulses. Pause. For long pulses. Pause. Always 4. I stepped outside to inspect the external antenna. The cold hit like a wall. The sky was clear, aurora faintly flickering green across the horizon. The antenna tower wasn't damaged, but frost had formed in strange spirals along the metal. Concentric patterns, as if the cold had gathered deliberately. When I re-entered the station, the interior temperature had dropped 6 degrees. The generator output was stable. No reason for heat loss. The signal monitor had intensified. The green line no longer flickered. It held steady, thick, almost solid. The audio feed had changed. The breathing sound was closer, louder. I turned off the speakers. The sound continued, not through the system. In the room, behind me, slow inhale, long exhale. I spun around. Nothing. But condensation formed in the air directly in front of my face, as if something warm had exhaled into freezing space. I told myself it was psychological. Isolation affects perception. The Arctic is known for sensory distortion. I documented everything in my field log, forcing clinical language, possible auditory hallucination, environmental stress factor. Even as I wrote that, the pen vibrated in my hand, subtly, for tremors. Pause. For tremors. At 22 o'clock, the station's exterior motion sensor activated. I checked the camera feed. The snowfield outside was flat, undisturbed, but the sensor light blinked steadily. Something was moving within range. It just wasn't visible. The signal monitor spiked again. This time the screen glitched. The green line fractured into multiple layers like depth, as if the transmission wasn't coming from one direction, but from everywhere at once, surrounding the station, encircling it. The breathing in the room synchronized with the audio feed again. For pulses. Pause. For pulses. My own breathing began unconsciously matching it. Inhale, 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 pause. I forced myself to break the rhythm. The room temperature dropped further. The walls creaked. Not from wind. From pressure. Like something immense, leaning against the exterior panels. The metal flexed inward, then released. Snow fell from the roof in a sudden cascade. The motion sensor light stopped blinking. I checked the exterior camera again. There were depressions in the snow now. Large, circular, not footprints. Not animal tracks. Perfect rings pressed into the surface. 4 of them, arranged in a square around the building. The signal monitor flatlined. No pulse. Just a constant solid green bar. The audio became silence. Complete. Oppressive. Then a single sound. Not breath. Not static. Tone. Deep. Resonant. It vibrated through the floor into my boots. The windows frosted over instantly. Not gradually. A flash of white crystallization spreading outward from the center of each pane. And in that frost shapes, circular, 4-lobed patterns repeating across the glass. Identical to the depressions outside. The tone increased in frequency. My teeth vibrated. The light fixtures flickered, but didn't fail. The generator output remained normal. This wasn't electrical interference. It was pressure, sound as force. I stepped toward the main door. Wouldn't open, not frozen. It held resistance from the outside, as if something vast pressed gently but firmly against it. The metal bent inward slightly. 4 slow impacts struck the door, evenly spaced, deliberate. The breathing returned but layered, multiple rhythms overlapping, all in sets of 4. The frost patterns on the windows pulsed faintly with each exhale. The signal monitor screen cracked from internal stress, yet the green bar remained, unbroken. Then I understood something. The signal wasn't reaching the station. The station was amplifying it, broadcasting back. Whatever this was, it responded to resonance, to repetition, to mirrored frequency. I shut down the transmitter. The tone dropped instantly. The pressure on the door eased. The frost stopped spreading. The breathing slowed. For pulses, pause. 3, pause. 2, pause. 1, silence. The exterior camera feed cleared. The snow depressions were gone. No marks, no disturbance. The motion sensor light was dark. The signal monitor screen was shattered completely now. Dead. No input. At dawn, weak Arctic light filtered through fractured frost. The building looked normal again, still abandoned. I packed the archive drives. Logged minimal details in my official report. Unidentified signal anomaly. Equipment malfunction. Transmission discontinued. I did not mention the breathing, or the patterns, or the pressure on the door. Weeks later, back in mainland Norway, I monitored open scientific channels out of curiosity. A temporary weather station installed 60 kilometers from the old site reported unexplained signal interference at night. For long pulses. Pause. For long pulses. I know now it wasn't haunting. It wasn't poltergeist activity. It wasn't human. It didn't throw objects. It didn't rearrange furniture. It didn't try to enter violently. It tested resonance. When it found something that answered, it came closer. The abandoned station in Svalbard is scheduled for demolition next year. I hope they dismantled the antenna first. Because somewhere beyond radio spectrum, beyond atmosphere, something moves in patterns of 4. It listens for echoes. Thanks for listening. And if you like scary stories like this, make sure to subscribe. Story 4. The light was never meant to turn back on. I took the lighthouse job because I needed isolation, not peace, not inspiration. Distance. The lighthouse stood alone on a jagged stretch of Atlantic coastline, several miles from the nearest fishing village. It had been automated for decades, then fully decommissioned, then restored as a historical landmark that no one visited during winter. My contract was simple: remain on site for 3 weeks while restoration crews were between phases. Monitor structural stability. Keep vandals out. No tours, no boats, no company, just wind, rock, and sea. The first night felt manageable. The Atlantic moved in long, heavy surges against the cliff below. The foghorn system was no longer active, but I could almost hear its ghost in the wind. The interior of the lighthouse had been partially modernized: new wiring, backup power, security cameras in the lower hall. But the lantern room at the top? That had been restored to its original configuration. It wasn't connected to the grid. The head restorer had made that very clear. The light is decorative only, he told me before leaving. It cannot power on. The wiring's been preserved historically, not functionally. I confirmed it myself. No live feed, no generator link, nothing. The bulb was antique. The lens was original Fresnel, glass massive, circular, and immaculate. It was a museum piece. Dead. On my third night, the fog rolled in thick. So thick I couldn't see the cliff edge from the lower balcony. At 11:42 p.m., I noticed something unusual. The interior walls of the stairwell reflected faint movement, soft, rotating, like distant light passing through glass. I climbed the spiral staircase slowly. The higher I went, the brighter the rotation became. Golden, steady, impossible. The lantern room door was closed, but beneath it, light spilled in rhythmic sweeps. I opened the door. The lens was turning, slowly, gracefully, casting a full beacon into the fog. The bulb inside glowed warm and alive. No extension cords, no visible wiring, just light. I stepped forward and felt warmth radiating from it. The glass hummed faintly. My first instinct was structural fault. Residual charge. Some overlooked connection. I checked the breaker panel downstairs. Nothing. The entire lighthouse was drawing minimal power from the auxiliary system. The lantern circuit remained disconnected. And yet the beam continued rotating. It didn't blink randomly. It rotated in perfect intervals, as if signaling. Out into the fog. Into something unseen beyond the cliff. I stood at the window and followed the beam outward. The fog swallowed it almost immediately, but I had the distinct impression it was answering something. The next morning, the light was off, cold, lifeless, as if it had never activated. I inspected the bulb. It was warm to the touch. That afternoon, I walked the cliff perimeter. No footprints except mine. No boats offshore, no buoys. No ships on the horizon. The lighthouse had not been active in official records for decades, and yet someone had once depended on it. At night, I didn't wait for it. At exactly 11:42 p.m., the light returned, rotating, steady. I timed the revolution. 8 seconds per full sweep. Exact, precise, mechanical perfection. But no motor was running. Then I saw him, not clearly, not fully formed. Just a silhouette at the edge of the lantern room. Standing where no one could physically stand between the lens and the glass wall. Tall, still facing. Outward toward the sea. When the beam passed through his shape, it didn't distort, passed through, as if he were part of the light, or made from it. I didn't speak, didn't move. The figure never turned toward me, just watched the horizon. The temperature in the room dropped, not freezing, just heavy, pressurized, like air before a storm. The rotation slowed slightly, 7 seconds per sweep, then 6. The beam brightened. I felt something then, not fear exactly, recognition. As though I had interrupted something routine, something repeated nightly for years. The silhouette shifted slightly, and I understood he wasn't guarding the land. He was waiting for something offshore. The fog thickened outside. The beam struck something in the distance. For just a fraction of a second, I saw a darker shape within the fog. Not a boat, too large, too undefined, and low to the water. The silhouette leaned forward, the rotation accelerated. The beam pulsed slightly at the end of each sweep, like emphasis, like insistence. The fog beyond the cliff swirled unnaturally, converging toward the lighthouse. I stepped backward. The floor beneath me vibrated faintly. The glass walls creaked as if under subtle pressure. The silhouette's outline sharpened. Old coat, broad shoulders, hat brim, a keeper. Then the beam flickered. Once, twice. The fog shape halted, stopped advancing. The silhouette straightened. The rotation returned to 8 seconds. Steady, calm. The fog began to disperse. The light shut off abruptly. The lantern room fell into darkness. The silhouette vanished instantly. No fade, no transition, just absence. The next day, I researched the lighthouse's history and archived files left in the storage room. One entry stood out: 1893. A severe fog bank. Supply ship vanished offshore. The keeper reportedly refused to extinguish the beacon for 3 consecutive nights, despite orders to conserve fuel. He was later found deceased at the lantern controls. No visible cause. That night, 11:42 p.m., came again. The light returned, but this time, it rotated slower. 10 seconds per sweep. The silhouette appeared more defined. The fog beyond the cliff moved faster. The darker shape offshore was closer now. Not solid, not liquid. A distortion in the fog. A vertical absence. Like something rising from beneath the surface, drawn by the light. The silhouette turned toward me. For the first time. His face wasn't detailed, but his expression carried urgency, not anger, not warning. Plea. The beam flickered. The offshore distortion surged forward. Without thinking, I grabbed the manual lens brake, a purely decorative lever installed for authenticity. It wasn't connected to anything, but I pulled it anyway. The rotation stopped. Instantly, the beam froze mid-sweep. The fog distortion halted, then recoiled, slowly retreating into the mist. The silhouette looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. The light extinguished. It hasn't turned on since. The restoration crew returned 2 weeks later. They tested every system, declared the lantern fully non-functional. Beautiful piece of history, one of them said. Shame it doesn't work. I said nothing. Sometimes when fog rolls across the coast near my apartment miles away, I wake at exactly 11:42 p.m. Certain, I see a faint golden sweep against my bedroom wall. 8 seconds. Perfect. Measured, as if the lighthouse still stands watch. And somewhere beyond the horizon, something still waits for it to turn back on. Story 5. Unit 417 was never empty. The first night was easy. 12-hour shift. Just me, a thermos of coffee, and 1,000 empty hallways. I was the new night manager at Secure Space Storage, a brand new facility built on the outskirts of town. It was so new you could still smell the paint. My job was simple. Patrol the floors, check the locks, and make sure no one was trying to live in their units. For the first week, the most exciting thing that happened was a faulty motion sensor on the 3rd floor. It was a piece of cake. Then people started moving their stuff in. Boxes, furniture, memories packed away in cardboard. The facility started to feel less like an empty warehouse and more like a mausoleum of forgotten things. And that's when things started to get weird. It all centered around one unit, number 417. The first incident was subtle. I was doing my 3 a.m. patrol, walking down the long, silent corridor of the 4th floor. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights and the squeak of my own shoes. As I passed Unit 417, I heard a noise, a soft scraping sound, like a wooden chair being dragged across a concrete floor. I stopped, listening. Silence. I figured it was just the building settling, or maybe a rat. I made a note in my log and moved on. The next night it happened again. Same time. 3:12 a.m. on the dot. This time it was louder. A distinct heavy thud, like a stack of books falling over. It came from inside 417. I pressed my ear to the cold metal door. Nothing. I unlocked the main office computer to check the tenant info. The unit was rented by an elderly woman named Eleanor Vance. She'd moved her things in just a few days prior. Maybe she packed something precariously. I shrugged it off, but it kept happening. Every single night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., a noise would erupt from 417. A crash, a bang, a shatter. It was getting harder to ignore. My heart would start pounding around 3:10. I'd find myself unconsciously holding my breath as I approached the 4th floor. One night, I decided to check the security camera footage for that hallway. The camera was positioned at the far end, looking straight down the corridor. I scrolled to 3:12 a.m. The footage was grainy, but clear. At 3:11, the hallway was still empty. At 3:12, the camera feed flickered violently for a second, a burst of static, and then returned to normal. Nothing else. No one entered, no one left. But I knew I'd heard a sound like glass shattering. The following evening, I called Mrs. Vance. I explained that I was the night manager and that there seemed to be some noise coming from her unit each night. Her voice was frail, confused. She said, "That's impossible, young man. All I put in there was my late husband's old study, his desk, his books, his chair. Nothing that could just fall." I asked if anything was fragile. "It's just a framed photograph on the desk," she said. "But it's just one photo." The next night I was determined to catch it. I brought a digital audio recorder with me. At 3:10 a.m., I stood right outside Unit 417, recorder in hand, my own breathing loud in the silence. The air grew cold, a sudden unnatural chill that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The seconds ticked by. 3:11 and 50 seconds. My phone's clock ticked over to 3:12 a.m. Inside the unit, a tremendous crash exploded, so loud it made me jump back. It sounded like the entire contents of the room had been thrown against the far wall. Then silence. Absolute, dead silence. Shaking, I used my master key to override the lock. The heavy metal door rolled up with a groan, revealing the dark interior. I shone my flashlight inside. The unit was packed, but neat. An old oak desk stood against the back wall, a leather-bound chair tucked neatly underneath. Bookshelves lined one side, every book perfectly in place. Nothing was out of order. Nothing was broken. And on the desk, facing the door, was a single, silver-framed photograph of a smiling, older man. Everything was pristine. I backed out, my mind reeling. I checked my audio recorder. I hit play. All it picked up was static. A blast of white noise at the exact moment I heard the crash. It didn't make sense. I started digging into the history of the property. The facility was new, sure, but what was here before? Old town records were a pain to search, but after a few hours in the library archives, I found it. Decades ago, the land where Secure Space now stood was the site of the old Blackwood Mill. And in 1953, there was a terrible accident, a boiler explosion. It happened in the middle of the night. Several workers were killed. I found a list of the victims, and my blood ran cold. One of the names was Arthur Vance. The time of the explosion, according to the official coroner's report. 3:12 a.m. I felt a pit in my stomach. I looked up the photo of Arthur Vance online from an old newspaper clipping about the accident. It was the same smiling man from the photograph on the desk in Unit 417. Eleanor had stored her husband's belongings in a unit built on the very spot where he had died. That night, work was unbearable. The silence of the facility felt heavy, watchful. As 3 a.m. approached, I couldn't bring myself to go to the 4th floor. I stayed in the office, watching the camera feed for that hallway. 3:10, 3:11. My eyes were glued to the screen. At 3:12 a.m., the feed didn't just flicker. It went completely black. And at the same instant, every light on the 4th floor went out. The emergency lights kicked on, casting the hallways in a hellish red glow. My radio crackled to life. But it wasn't the security dispatcher. It was a voice, a distorted, guttural whisper, laced with static. It said one word, "Out." Then the fire alarm for the 4th floor began to blare. I grabbed my keys and sprinted for the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to make sure it wasn't a real fire. As I burst onto the 4th floor, the alarm abruptly stopped. The red emergency lights flickered and died, plunging the hallway into total darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hand shaking too much to turn it on. And then I heard it. Down the hall, near 417, the squeal of metal, the groaning, unmistakable sound of a roll-up storage door being opened. Not by a key, not by a person. It was being forced. The metal was buckling, bending outwards as if something inside was trying to punch its way out. The sound was deafening, a shriek of tortured steel echoing in the confined space. I finally got my flashlight on, its beam cutting through the oppressive dark. The door to Unit 417 was bulging outward, the metal warped and distorted. Then, with a final violent boom, it was ripped from its tracks and thrown down the hallway, crashing into the wall just feet from where I stood. I froze, my light fixed on the gaping black maw of the unit. For a moment, there was nothing. And from the darkness, the old oak desk began to slide forward. It moved on its own, scraping across the concrete floor, followed by the chair. And then the bookshelves, all emptying themselves into the hallway. It was like watching the room vomit its contents. Books, papers, and knickknacks spilled onto the floor. And in the center of the chaos, the silver-framed photograph lay face up. The light from my flashlight caught the glass, and I could see Arthur Vance's smiling face. But the air around it shimmered, like heat haze off asphalt. The cold intensified until I could see my own breath. The whisper returned, no longer from the radio, but all around me, in the air itself. A chorus of static-filled whispers, overlapping, angry. Out. Get out. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was out of the building and in the safety of the parking lot, gasping for air under the streetlights. I quit the next morning. I told my boss the stress was too much. I never told him the real reason. A few weeks later, I heard that the secure space facility had a major incident. A gas leak, they said, that caused a small explosion on the 4th floor. It originated from Unit 417. Nobody was hurt, but the damage was extensive. I knew it wasn't a gas leak. It was Arthur. Still there, still restless, still trapped in that place. Some things just don't want to be stored away. Some things need to be let go. Thanks for tuning into our story tonight. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next tale. Stay safe out there, and always check the history of the ground you're standing on. You never know what's buried underneath.